Each week, I sit down and focus a little bit more specifically on what is it that the planetary dance is trying to awaken in me that I might share with you in an effective enough way that an awakening process will continue to unfold in what it is that we have to share together. Sharing together, all of us as human beings are somewhere on the surface of this globe. And every day, every 24 hours, our globe rotates entirely around. My sense is that basically all of us are being invited, if you will, into an attunement each day with all the planetary surrounding experiences every day. My current inclination leans into the recognition that instead of attempting to focus our energies on one or two major points in this life dance process with an overemphasis upon them, perhaps we might recognize that all of us are in this same celestial dance every day. All these planetary energies, are they not attempting to remind us that there's a larger level of conversation going on that we are being invited to engage with without an overemphasis on any one particular part being more significant than the others? Even as I say this, I think of the unfolding cycle of the seasons as we go through them, where the sun shifts from one sign to the next. And it's like, in a way, changing hats, but, you know, we're in Scorpio season right now. We all, each of us, has a Scorpio portion that is being stimulated. When you look at the unfolding of the whole cycle, Scorpio brings us into that zone of interface that we've just come out of Libra, the process of not so much focusing on our individual selves, but trying to grasp the meaning of why we engage with one another. Scorpio comes along after that Libra, and it brings more of the social interaction uh, to the surface. A reminder that, you know, what are the ramifications of actually engaging with one another on a far more intimate, intentional, interactive level that is an invitation to take the next step. Yeah, we can bounce around with a lot of other people and stuff and, share general conversations and stuff. When the Scorpio season, which we're in right now, enters, there's a much more profound invitation to not be shallow in what it is that we are each inviting one another into as an interactive play, an interplay, if you will, that wants to go deeper, is looking for the requirement of an honesty and a trust in a zone of interface where the often portrayed versions of who we see ourselves as are likely to be challenged by others as we engage in stepping out from behind the shadow version of who we are. We each have this Scorpio part in us, and the potential for soul development requires an honest recognition that I may not accurately have created a version that I'm putting out there into the world of who I am. In the exchange of consideration with another, hopefully at an honest level, each of us can point out factors that are afoot that may not be entirely clear as a representation of who we really are. I recently finished reading a book by a friend of mine called Mrs. H and Her Students by Antonella Vicini. In it, she brings up the consideration of two main types of people. One, circular. Picture, if you will, an exchange taking place in a group where everybody is sitting in a circle. Nobody is hiding behind anybody else. She uses in her classroom protocol, the use of the talking stick, to be able to allow whoever is bringing it to focus to have the attention of everybody else as they have the floor. There's something very organic about the circle. Now, number two, other types of people she refers to as square. Picture, if you will, energy beings, some circular, willing to recognize there is something quite dynamic that is transpiring between us. The square energies moving around, they have hard, flat edges, points at the corners, and stuff that as the interaction transpires with them, there is less of the experience of trust. There are challenges. There is an emphasis on differences, which differences aren't necessarily wrong, unless, of course, one happens to determine that because of the differences, I don't trust you. When the reality is that trust, it's coming from within you. You don't trust them? No, you don't trust something in yourself that hasn't recognized from the circular perspective that we are all a part of the same whole at work. And these are the two main types of human beings floating around on the planet. The round ones are interested in community, coming together to facilitate some aspect of togetherness that is the reason why we have the particular uh, attributes that we each have to offer into the whole. And the square type running around trying to, determine, I want what you have. I'm willing to go to war in order to get it because I don't trust you. I don't trust myself. So here we are now in the sign of Scorpio, where the intensity of an inter exchange of processes is inviting us to, really tune in at a profound level in what is possible when we honestly consider each other in an open enough fashion that, from the Scorpio perspective, the mysteries of life can be delved into oh so much more uniquely. To follow that into what the charts say is going on now, it would be probably of assistance to make the determination within each of us. Am I a round type person? Am I a square type person? Each of you is going to know that answer. And each of you is being invited to consider the whole. We're all on this same planetary being. Each of us is made up of its elements. Each of us is moving through space together. To overemphasize any one of the so-called celestial aspect patterns without a recognition that they're all at work all the time, inviting us into this life dance in unique fashion that is an invitation that as we gather together, we might compare notes to determine, what is currently wanting to awaken because of the celestial dance that's going on for all of us right now. We're in the season of Scorpio. Transformation is afoot. How willing is your perspective on what is required in the transformation fields by you as we compare notes? One of the flavors of Scorpio is secretiveness. Now, secretiveness represents or can represent perhaps some level of unclarity as to our willingness to open up with one another about anything. Or are there things that need to be kept private and secret? This thought as I mull it around right here gives me a certain indication that perhaps there are factors awaiting our growth that in some fashion are being kept from one another that would allow more of the development of circular, rounded characters to smooth off some of the rougher edges of that square type personality. As they too become aware of the fact that we're all in this boat together. We're all in the process of growing soul in one fashion or another that is circular. There is a sought after harmony that's always present. We just have to wake up to it. As this week unfolds, Mercury will shift from Scorpio to Sagittarius. The level of communication, Mercury, traveling through the deep realms of Scorpio, stirring up factors that, may not necessarily be the most comfortable as we engage with one another. has been at work as Mercury shifts this week. On Wednesday, a Mercury day, into Sagittarius, you have to ask yourself, how well, how effective was I at purging that interconnected level of communication viability with others so that as I or my mercurial part steps across that border into Sagittarius, I will be shown a much larger perspective, Sagittarius, going for the more, in what it is that I am able to accomplish, share with one another at another level. Is my curiosity, Mercury, going to be contained or held back by things that did not really surface as much as they could have while doing the Scorpio dance? That as I move into Sagittarius and the invitation, which is always there for there is always more, might be hindered because of a lack of trust in myself for being able to take that next step. Are you ready? That's one of the main things that's happening this week. We're still in the season of Scorpio. It's not like because Mercury has stepped across the line from Scorpio into Sagittarius that Scorpio fades into the background. None of the signs ever fade into the background. They're always in play in each of our worlds in very unique fashions, which is why we've been invited into the circle of life to share with one another. One of the aspects that I brought up at the end of last week was the grand water trine with Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. When you think of the water signs, I wrote down a phrase that came to mind: generation of a level of camaraderie. Because the water signs are about connection. It can happen at so many different levels. The invitation that I'm putting out to you today is to utilize a circular level of connection rather than always being the challenge of hard edge pointed square perspectives that do not sustain the level of interactive connection that grows our soul awareness and is one of the reasons for doing the earth dance. Not necessarily always easy. The challenges appear when we set up hard and fast borders squares with one another that keep us separate. This grand water trine is the invitation to release that level of separation in an effective enough way that any of the rough edges that we might have could be smoothed. Wednesday, there it is. Mercury has just entered Sagittarius. We're at our first quarter moon, the waxing quarter, crisis in action across there between Scorpio and Aquarius. Two very fixed energies. So this first quarter moon, you know, you might feel a certain tenseness in the air. Scorpio, dive deep. Interact with each other at an intimate, interpersonal kind of level. Aquarius. What might be spun out of that scorpionic version of interplay that could be an embellishment upon what Aquarius community can be about if we were able to honestly work at a much more profound level with one another. Can you sense there, that crisis in action right now? We're being invited into the potential for a new transformational kind of community that's not based on the hard aspects of life that every day seems to want to be played up, unfortunately, way too often, without the recognition that there are reasons why each of us is present right now to engage with one another on a much more interplay arena with each other's soul level of awareness. To add a little extra twist into this, as soon as Mercury comes into Sagittarius, it opposes Uranus retrograde down here in Gemini. Suddenly, there's a Uranus thing in the sign that Mercury rules. You know, might there be an awakening of inspiration that suddenly showed up in a mercurial fashion about, taking the next step, Sagittarius, into what I don't really know yet, but have I got the willingness to actually go there? Be the inventor of something, interdisciplinary that is an invitation for each and all of us to take a next step. That's all I'm going to do for this week's consideration. It isn't entirely astrological, but is anything ever entirely of one flavor? I hope not. No. We have a much more unique level of dance that the astrological tool is just one of the variables that can stand as an invitation to each of us to recognize that we are all made up of these same planetary energies in quite unique fashion, and as such, we need to compare notes so that what is allowed to grow from and through us can be new and not just a repetition of the same old, same old. So as you go through this week, take a chance. Can you be honest with what it is that you see in someone else, in yourself, as you engage at the potentially strong, intimate, interpersonal space that opens up between you and another? That's your homework. See you all next week.